All right, welcome back in here to Live and Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Another day of witness testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial in New York City as the music mogul faces the federal charges of sex trafficking and racketeering. And today on the stand was a former assistant to Diddy, of course, detailing some very graphic, violent moments between him and Cassie and also him and his assistant. I do want to put up just this, a live picture right now of New York City as a woman who is only being referred to by a pseudonym, Mia, testified that she used to work for Sean Diddy Combs as a personal assistant, and she accused Combs of sexually assaulting her, amongst other things. Let's be joined right now by Fox 5's Lisa Evers on the ground outside of the courtroom as another day wraps up. Lisa, what did we learn inside the courtroom today?
Well, Andy, first of all, let me tell you that there was unusual security and privacy concerns surrounding this witness who was using the name, as you pointed out, the pseudonym Mia. And we can't show you any sketches from the courtroom because, you know, there's no phones allowed, there's no video allowed, there's no cameras allowed in the federal courtroom. So most of the time during these big cases in federal court, we're relying on these sketch artists who are court authorized in order to take sketches during the trial. So at least we have something and can give the public some idea of what's going on. Today, the Judge Arun Subramanian, ordered the sketch artist not to do any drawings of Mia. And while she was on the stand, she has blonde hair, she had long bangs, she had her head down like this much of the time. But she got up there, she told about more abuse against Cassie. She said that one time she and Cassie snuck out, that was the language she used, of a hotel room they were staying at that Diddy told them to stay in. They went out to a party that was given by music legend Prince. This was after a big award show night in LA, and that she, when Diddy found out about it, he showed up there with his bodyguards and just got out of the car and started beating on Cassie. Prince's security detail, this is what she testified to, Prince's security detail came and pulled them off Cassie, basically saving her, told them all to get out of there. And this was some shocking report, shocking allegation of something like that happening in such a public, high-profile type of venue and a location. So the other thing that she started to tell us this afternoon, very, very tearfully, she was talking about Diddy, the abuse, the emotional abuse, the verbal abuse, being told to work for 24 hours straight the first day that she was working for him, being kept in his house for 5 days straight without any chance to leave. And then she started talking about this alleged abuse by Diddy against Cassie. Many of these stories, unfortunately, now familiar to us from other witnesses that we've heard, Andy, in this trial. And then she started detailing how one night she was asleep in Combs' home because he had the habit of having his assistants be on call 24 hours a day. She was asleep in a bedroom. He told her not to lock the door, and he said, nobody locks the doors in my house. So she's asleep in a room. And she testified that she was awakened when she felt a heavy weight on top of her. She felt somebody on top of her, opened her eyes, and it was Combs. She said he unzipped his pants and then raped her. And this was not the only time, that there were other assaults. And what was really sad, and this, again, just a time frame, this was about 15 years ago. So a lot of the police departments were not as developed as they are now in terms of handling sexual assault allegations and complaints from victims. She said that she didn't think it was an option to call the police and to report this to police, and she didn't tell Combs no. Here was another shocker. She said she didn't tell Combs no, get off me or anything like that because she was afraid that he would ruin her life. So the day finished off with Deontay Nash, the former stylist to Cassie and Diddy. He was talking about more assaults on Cassie, very brutal, and also that, how she covered up many of these bruises because she's still going out to these events and trying to really launch her music career, were covered up with makeup, many of the bruises on her body. But very disturbing, and it was clearly very, very tough for her to talk about this. And she said the reason she was speaking up about this in court was because she wanted other victims to know that they did not have to remain silent anymore, and that this was the most shameful period of her life. Just very, very sad. So that was the big headliner that came out of today, Andy.
Yeah, it's a lot of graphic news, and you mentioned some of the information with Cassie as this individual, this ex-assistant, personal assistant to Diddy, said she felt like sisters with Cassie. And you mentioned a point I want to get into is that she also felt that Diddy's authority was above police, that she couldn't go to authorities without getting retribution. How much could that have a weight on the jury that she didn't think that even if she went to police, it would have any impact?
Well, you know what? This isn't the first time that we've heard this outside of the trial in some of these civil suits, is that the alleged victims have said that they didn't feel that they could go to police because some of them, in some jurisdictions, I'm not confirmed in L.A., not confirmed in New York, obviously, but that some of the victims felt that the police were very friendly to Diddy because of his celebrity status. Some of them in some of the smaller municipalities, we've heard, and again, unproven in court, that they were actually, some of them working part-time, moonlighting as security for Diddy. But the main bulk of the security guards, like the ones involved in the incident at Prince's party, were staff members of Diddy. That these names keep coming up. This Paulie, D-Rock, these were his permanent security that were always with him, his closest guards. But it's just a shame that women felt, that these women felt that they had absolutely nowhere to turn in terms of getting any help or any kind of protection or any kind of advice about a safety escape plan of how to get out of these situations that were much more complex than what we can even imagine, Andy.
My last question before I let you go, because you are so dialed into the music industry, and that story about how these individuals went to a party, snuck away to a party with the music icon Prince, and they had to be obviously intervened. Security for Prince had to intervene between Cassie and Diddy. Was there any indication that Prince knew about this interaction? Do we learn that from the case? Is there anything more you can tell us about that?
No, there's no indication that Prince knew about it. It sounded like the whole thing just popped off very, very quickly. Diddy and the bodyguards, according to the testimony, got out of the car that they were traveling in, the SUV apparently, I believe SUV. They get out, they find Cassie. This was a theme also that's come out with some of these some of the stories. They found Cassie, and then Diddy just allegedly started beating on her, and then Prince's security, which I'm sure was extremely thorough and highly professional, especially with the crowd that was at that, the location of this party. For him to be giving a party, you know how rare that had to be and how special. So they dealt with it right away. They literally pulled Diddy off Cassie, separated them, tried to calm the situation down, and then really told them all to leave, because it was just a really ugly thing. And as we all know, those of us who love and admired Prince for his career, what he stood for in his music, it was all about peace. It was all about love, having a good time. So I really doubt that he knew about it. I spoke just a couple of days ago, because there had been talk. Prince's name had come up once before of any connection, and the person that I spoke with, who was very close to Prince while he was alive, said to me, Lisa, he goes, I never heard him mention anything like that. So I doubt that he was, aware. I'm sure, being in LA too, it was a rather large space or large house. I'm not sure where exactly the party was taking place, but there's no indication that we have that the late great Prince ever knew about it. But his security detail certainly spared Cassie some additional bruises that particular night, Andy.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about that, because we talked about Cassie, and she feared for her career as well as her life in terms of interacting with Diddy, and of course Prince, the icon that he was, maybe above that level even Diddy was at. What comes next in terms of this trial, Lisa? What are we expecting to hear on the stand? Because it seems day after day, more explosive, graphic testimony. What comes tomorrow?
Well, Mia is going to be back on the stand tomorrow. She will most likely be cross-examined by Diddy's team, and they're going to have to tread very, very lightly, because she's a very sympathetic witness, I would say, and I think a lot of legal experts would agree with that. A very sympathetic witness, a reluctant witness, a woman who looked like she had to look at herself, look at her life, and say, you know what, I have to be able to put this behind me and speak out about this. Now, the defense, there's some indication that the the prosecution may be changing, maybe adding some other witnesses or other elements to the case. We're not sure what that is. If that's the case, the defense says they will have to extend their presentation. Remember, we're still in the prosecution phase of the trial where they're presenting their witnesses. These are all their witnesses that they're presenting. Then the defense will present their witnesses. They're still looking at about 6 more weeks of this going on. But Andy, I really think at this point, there's a lot on the line for Combs. We can't remind people enough. If he loses this, he's going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. This is federal time. This is not state time. Go and cry before a judge and say you're an old man and you need to get back with your family or whatever. And the other thing that's really that's very touching, once again, his sons were here back in court, arriving together, show of strength and show of unity for Diddy. And we have to remember, Andy, it's just as much as, we're hearing these shocking stories, the prosecution has to build a very specific case according to what the legal experts I've been talking to have been instructing me. And they say that these RICO cases, this RICO sex trafficking case, the prostitution across state lines, that with the federal cases, they're very specific bars, if you will, that they have to hit, very specific points that they have to be able to prove to the jury. And in order to get a conviction on these cases, it's not just, if this was a current state case of domestic violence or assault, there's one felony after another. If the testimony is proven to be correct, but accurate and believable to the jury. But the fact is, this is not what this is about. And his team keeps denying. They're saying, this is not about sex trafficking. You will not see anybody come on the stand who will say, this is what his defense team said, you will not see anybody come on the stand in the prosecution case who claims that they were sex trafficked. And they do have a point there. We've heard from sex workers who say they were flown in, but is that going to be enough to prove the trafficking? And it's a very complicated case, and it's complicated also by the fact, as we heard with these unfortunate and traumatic details from this assistant Mia, that it was all intertwined with business. It was a very unconventional lifestyle. This was not something where you're going to an office in the morning, you're coming out and going to your own home at night. And Diddy had an knack for really controlling every aspect of these people's lives. So we're going to be watching this very, very closely for you, because I think I just want to put past it any type of surprises at this point, Andy.
Yeah, it's day in and day out, doing such a great job there, Lisa. And of course, this high bar for this federal case, but also the increased punishment potentially on the line for this music mogul, Diddy. All right, Lisa, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Definitely. Thanks, Andy.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Great conversation, as always, talking about the ex-assistant, personal assistant to Sean Diddy Combs, talking about the sexual assault that she also had to sustain, of course, accused there in this federal case, but also talking about and vouching for what Cassie just said on the stand, as she was very early on in some of the witness testimony. I'm Andy Mack here on Live Now from Fox. A live look one more time there in New York City. We'll get into more details of this trial after this.